Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are around the world. Welcome to our ongoing webinar series, where today we're having a distinguished guest and a senior executive that will be sharing a lot of insights for us to learn and develop further. This is Cüneyt Evirgen. I'm the faculty director at GSU-CIBER from Atlanta, Georgia. And you've been tuned into our webinar series offered by GSU-CIBER on behalf of a total of 10 MSI Cyber Consortium consisting of 10 cybers. And this particular webinar, we're very happy to be sponsored by Global Atlanta and as part of our executive webinar series. And if you have come on for the first time, welcome. If you are a returning attendee, welcome again. And I hope you'll be enjoying the next hour learning about the practice of international business from a senior executive. I would also like to thank the GSU-CIBER team, starting with Paula Huntley, Jamaica Villegas, and Michael Wallace, who are the people behind the scenes making all this happen in a very successful and seamless manner. Our webinars started back in April 2020. That was the time of COVID, as you might recall. And as of today, we've reached almost 90 such webinars, focusing on either the teaching, the research, or the practice of international business. And this particular webinar, titled Murata, the tiny parts, huge impact on global supply chains, is an example of a conversation with a senior business executive. Just a couple of notes, reminders. All of our webinars are recorded, and they would be available after a brief editing on our website, as well as the GSU-CIBER YouTube channel. Secondly, when you exit, when we're done with the webinar, you'll receive an email requesting your feedback on the webinar through completing a brief feedback survey. And everyone except the panelists will be muted in the webinar, but we do encourage questions and comments and directed to the speakers. And you may use the Q&A function of Zoom to basically share your questions, which will be answered in due time. And if there will be any handouts, they will be provided or to be distributed. They will be emailed to the participants. So as I said, today's topic or theme is Murata, tiny parts, huge impact on global supply chains. And we have the honor of hosting Mr. David Kirk, who is the president and CEO of Murata Electronics North America. The webinar will last 60 minutes, and in due time, please use the Q&A button, Q&A link to share your questions. The webinar will be moderated by Trevor Williams from Global Atlanta, and I will be following up with your comments and intervening as necessary. So welcome again, and with that, Trevor, I will let introduction of David to you and start the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cüneyt. Very pleased to be here in partnership with Cyber once again. I really enjoy these opportunities to delve into the practice, like you said, of international business and really drive insights for hopefully for educators, but also for some of the business community that tends to tune into these as well. Again, I'm Trevor Williams, the managing editor of Global Atlanta. We are a news. You can see our logo there, old one anyway. We're a news platform here focused here in Atlanta, Georgia, focused on international business and how the world is connected to our city. And as you may or may not know, Japanese investment has been integral to that story. And so David's going to tell us a bit about Murata and its foundational role in that story over many, many years. I think it's 50 plus years at this point. So David is the president and CEO of Murata Electronics of North America, and he is responsible for various functions within the Americas, including sales and marketing operations, corporate technology, and innovation. Murata, as you'll hear from him, is very present in this region of the world. It's a globalized Japanese company with presence just about everywhere you can find electronics being made or distributed. So I'm going to let him talk a bit more about that. But Murata itself is headquartered in Kyoto, Japan. David, as you'll see, is not from Japan, and he's not from America. So we'll have let him describe how he got here. But he did graduate from Clemson University with a degree in electrical engineering, and he and his wife Tammy have 4 children, live in McKinney, Texas, and he enjoys golfing, hiking, cycling, fishing, and hanging out with grandkids. But his day-to-day life is running Murata's operations here in North America. So, David, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Trevor. Long introduction. Lot of things to talk about in there, but we'll get to the business stuff's more important, probably.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to kind of start with the personal. Your accent doesn't sound Japanese, and it doesn't sound like you're from here in the South. So, tell us a bit about your personal history, where you come from, and how you began working with a Japanese company.
Yeah, so I actually came to the United States in '79 and track scholarship, track and cross country to Clemson University in South Carolina, and graduated electrical engineering and moved to Atlanta in '84 and started with Murata. So right now, about 41 years of knowing the Murata family, and there is a Mr. Murata. He founded the company, and we've moved through various generations. But as you mentioned, my accent's a little different. It's not a heavy Scottish accent. And what I've found is I don't speak Japanese, but Japanese people can understand my English very, very well. And so one of the first things I was doing was translating Georgian English to English so translating English to English so Japanese people could understand. But yeah. No, that's how I came to the United States, and then I've moved throughout. I mean, in our factories in Pennsylvania, Texas, back to Georgia. I think I've lived in Georgia 3 times, Texas 3 times, so a number of different things over the years.
Amazing. Well, tell us a bit about Murata's Georgia history. I know that you started with manufacturing here in Georgia and many moons ago, back in the 1970s. And there's kind of a friendly dispute about whether Murata or YKK was the first Japanese company to land itself here. Yeah. But tell us what kind of precipitated that decision to set up, internationally in general, but particularly here in Georgia, and then how do you retain a presence here now?
So originally, the original Mr. Murata opened an office in New York City, 1963, I believe it was. About 73, we moved to Georgia, and we had multiple sites, Douglasville, Cartersville, Rockmart, throughout there, and manufacturing. In the early 80s, we made an acquisition of a company called Erie Technological Products. And that really accelerated the ceramic capacitor business that we're mainly known for. In the 80s, the reason for the big presence in Georgia, though, is you may go back to cell phones were just taking off, and Japanese companies were accused of dumping cell phones. And so you may remember in that time frame, the Mitsubishi, Matsushita, Fujitsu, Oki, every Japanese manufacturer was suddenly making cell phones in Georgia. And so that's one of the longer term histories. So tariffs and those types of things are not really new. It's a continuing history of activities there. But we have our headquarters, U.S. headquarters. We just recently moved in Atlanta. It's just south of Cumberland Mall. You'll see our building there on 41, kind of looking directly south at downtown. So that's our main office. We do have a warehouse out in Rockmart, Georgia. No manufacturing there. But then we have large offices, Dallas, San Jose, San Diego, a number of different sites. So that's kind of the history, fairly continuous, steady stream of acquisitions as well of different technologies. But Erie Technological one was a big one.
Yeah. What was the big product before you got into capacitors? What was kind of the foundational product for the company?
The foundational part is capacitors.
Okay.
But it's a very old technology called a disk capacitor. And now we've gone into a technology called multi-layer ceramic capacitors. So if you could imagine, say, 1 millimeter thick device, it has maybe 600 layers of ceramic.
Wow.
And so really condensed and downsized that product. And so some of our products now are, 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, that type of size. and literally selling billions of them. That's our main product, but we do have, batteries, sensors, power supplies, a number of different things, and we're even coming out with stretchable electronics now as well, flexible, stretchable.
Yeah, I remember I remember hearing about that when I visited your innovation center, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. But can you talk about, we're hearing a lot of discussion now about the prospect of moving manufacturing, quote unquote, back to the US. Some cases it's back, some cases it's bringing it in for the first time ever. But in your case, you have this ramp up to serve local demand. And then eventually kind of that dissipated and you had to follow your suppliers elsewhere. But can you talk about that shift in manufacturing out of the US, what that was like for Murata and how you stayed committed to this market even when that was happening?
Yes, so exactly correct. Probably I was in our factory in Pennsylvania in the 1990s. We more than doubled the size of that factory in the time that I was there. We were producing about 1 billion pieces a month, and probably late 1990s into 2000, basically the manufacturing, the customer base left the Americas, and so we actually ended up having to shut down the manufacturing. There was nobody here to actually support. And so we've done a fantastic job here in the Americas then of changing our focus to designing our products in, tracking the business and getting the business elsewhere globally for Murata, whether it's through the manufacturers or maybe a group called EMS, Electronic Manufacturers Services Groups, companies like Flextronics, Jabil, those types of companies. But now, there is some trend, but I think the trend is really, is it coming back to America or is it coming back to the Americas? And so we like to try and think of the Americas because obviously Mexico's got a much younger population, very aggressive for manufacturing capabilities. So I think, we really need to focus on the Americas and the growth and the kind of togetherness of the Americas for that manufacturing coming back.
Yeah. Can you talk about the factors? I mean, you said the customers left, but what was that related to? NAFTA? Was it related to generalized globalization, China entering WTO? Was it kind of all of the above?
Yeah, probably.
Because I think sometimes there's an oversimplification and there's a lumping in of globalization with automation, which is another whole factor. Can you talk about those trends a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I actually visited China for the first time in about 2000 and also visited Russia in that same time frame. And you could really kind of see the difference at that time. China was really starting to accelerate, have manufacturing and just the capabilities, the costs, that's where people were actually moving. And so, it was sort of at that time a win-win for everybody, and just kind of that natural progression. So a lot of it was China, but there was other countries in Asia as well where the manufacturing kind of shifted to. And that's where we have then obviously focused. We did start manufacturing in the 1990s in China, but we still have a very heavy concentration of manufacturing in Japan. But then migrated into many other countries now as well, Philippines, Malaysia, and in fact, just I think it was February, we announced a new site in India.
In India, okay, great. Yeah, I want to come back to that whole shift out of China or out of Japan to Southeast Asia. But I think before we get too much further down the road, I wondered if you can explain, maybe in layman's terms to dumb it down for me, what a capacitor is. And give us a sense for the size of these things. I mean, we don't often talk about companies producing in the trillions of units per year. And that's the distinction that Murata has. So tell us a bit about what a capacitor is, what it does, why it's so important to the modern global economy, even being so small per unit.
Yeah, so in electronics, basically, there's capacitors, resistor, inductors. Those are the three main, what we would call passive components. And those passive components go around a semiconductor, the semiconductor being the active component. And as you know, the semiconductor companies, the Intels, the NVIDIAs, those types of people, And so we do a very good job of trying to design our products in around that chip. And what it does, the capacitors, the resistors, and inductors, they basically guide the electronic signals through that circuit. Okay. And, you know, for maybe one chip, there could be as many as 2,000 to 3,000 of these passive components around it. Filters and, you know, then maybe even wireless modules as well, a number of different things. And so, you know, a smartphone, maybe we would have 1,000 of our parts in a smartphone. Fully EV car, you could maybe see 20 to 30,000 components of our components in there. So these are dramatically increased numbers, say, maybe a vehicle versus a regular internal combustion engine that would have maybe just keyless entry and a few other things. But now you've got this full EV. So, you know, you will have used our products probably, I'm going to say maybe 10 to 15 times today and didn't even know you used them. It's in your keyless entry, it's in your phone, it's in your laptop, it's in these things are in every electronic device.
Yeah, yeah. Well, given that, you've seen over your many years in business quite a number of disruptions or dislocations when it comes to supply chains. And I'm thinking back in Japan, I remember writing about actually my first visit to Japan was in 2011. So it was right before the tsunami and earthquake that killed so many people and really threw supply chains for a loop. And then, of course, fast forward to COVID, and then now we've got these sort of self-imposed constraints when it comes to tariffs and things like that, or man-made, I guess. How has Murata sort of dealt with that? And given that you are so kind of deeply embedded in the supply chains, have you seen like more of a consciousness of, you know, the full product or the full gamut of things that go into products these days?
Yes. Yeah, I think you're exactly correct. So March of 2011, I actually took over as the CEO of the Americas in April of 2011. So just right after that. And that was obviously a huge disaster, you know, on a personal level and then business wise. But I think that's when people really started to look into their supply chain. And not just, okay, this is my supplier, but who's the supplier of that supplier and who's the supplier, and trying to understand that full value chain. And so that was really, to me, I think, a big industry wake up. We've then had a number of events since then. You know, just in fact, January of 24, we had another huge earthquake that affected some of our facilities. But we've had COVID, we've had all kinds of different things. So I think, you know, through these, we've learned a lot, and we have a BCP, business continuity plan. And so when these things happen, we're basically ready. I don't say we're perfectly ready. The tariffs are giving us a lot of issues, but we have diverse manufacturing. So, you know, we are looking at various ways now, you know, to actually, I would say, mitigate tariffs where possible or where needed. And it's just trying to work through those. So I don't know if you call them good lessons or, you know, tragic kind of lessons, but basically lessons learned. And I think that's where we've obviously then continued to diversify that manufacturing as well. The Philippines is becoming a very big facility for us, as an example. Malaysia and some other things, and then the new one, as I just mentioned, in India.
Yeah. So, how much is the threat of the reciprocal tariffs kind of impeding your business planning and preparation? Because, of course, you know, with being so concentrated in Southeast Asia now, those were some of the countries that were slated to be hit with the higher tariffs, although paused at this moment through July. But would that be kind of devastating for y'all if those come into effect, or is it less so because you're integrated into other products?
Yeah, I would say there's nothing devastating. I mean, well, I should say the China tariffs at about 170%. Those are pretty much devastating. But the other ones are not. We need to just really figure out where the customer is, where the customer needs the product, and how we can supply it to them. And so is it we shift the factory from China to supply them from the Philippines? Do we shift the logistics path to free trade zones? Do we ship it directly into Mexico? It's all of these variables, and it's not a simple formula. It's going to almost vary customer by customer. And so that's the challenge right now, because these were enacted so fast. And obviously we're trying to work through that. But it's hard to say. I don't want to get into politics, obviously, but the U.S. does need to keep some manufacturing base. It's good for a country to have just a strong, robust overall economy, and you do need some manufacturing. So, but I think it's our fault. We actually moved it all out, and so now it's kind of a rebalancing. So. But I would say also that we tend to not just look at, okay, what are we going to do tomorrow or next week for the tariffs? We need to be thinking, and we make plans for 2030, 2040, and we've actually even started to talk about 2050. And so I think that's one of the beauties of a Japanese company, is they really keep that long-term visibility. And we don't really focus quarter by quarter. There's no pressure on earnings and things like that. So it's a little bit different, but with tariffs, we want to continue to really think of that long term. What's this longer term end game of this going to be?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that the harder part is figuring out where to go with the types of products you develop, in particular, which industries you focus on. So you mentioned the automotive sector. When I was in Yokohama at your innovation center, you have there's a BMW 7 Series. It's like kind of disaggregated or kind of blown open, where you can sort of see where capacitors are at each point in the car. And you've got so many different types of products. Wonder if you could talk a bit about which industries, including automotive, but beyond that as well, where you're seeing kind of new sources of demand potentially.
Yes. Well, you're exactly correct. Yokohama is a spectacular facility. The whole town, or the city of Yokohama, has a futuristic concept, though. Every building has connected on a raised level, so that pedestrians don't go on the street where vehicles are. They pass through each building, and so we have educational centers for kids and things like that in Yokohama. So that is our main R&D site there. But we also have R&D in the Americas. We continue to make acquisitions as well. Most recent acquisition was a radar company in San Diego. We've made wireless envelope tracking acquisition out of Boston. But we kind of along the lines of that 2030, 2040 type of idea, we have what does the future hold? What areas do we see? And so we just last week launched a CVC called Wonderstone Ventures, and they have some very, very specific themes that we want them to study. Optical, as an example, space, wellness, a number of different things. And so we've only got 6 kind of target areas. So we don't try to find everything. We're really targeting where do we see the best opportunity for electronics, and then we start to look for R&D activities in that, and then possibly even maybe some investment or maybe even acquisitions. So that's kind of the R&D kind of overall umbrella type of activity. It's managed here in the Americas through a group called, we call it CT&I, Corporate Technology and Investment, Corporate Technology and Innovation.
Okay. Yeah, now CVC is, for those who are dense like me, as corporate venture capital. Is that right?
Correct. Corporate venture capital, right? Yes.
Yeah.
It's about a $50 million fund. We just started. We've been doing the activity, but you'll see already there's some space companies that we've actually invested in, bioelectronics. I think the medical wellness space is going to be just ripe for electronics here in the future. The whole COVID actually helped accelerate that with telemedicine and people accepting these things. So really some big opportunities.
Yeah, and when I was in Yokohama, they scanned my brain with some like a headphone thing, and so it's a scary prospect for me, but it was really interesting to see. Um, Tell us, I mean, is it more about just figuring out where capacitors are going to go in the future, or is it about developing new, kind of moving up the chain and developing your own products,
No, it's
or
capacitors are
both?
all going to be automatic. They're needed,
Hmm. Yeah.
and whether they're individual capacitors or they're maybe buried in some other materials, there's a lot of activity still in the types of capacitors. But there we're looking. We have wireless modules. We have a thing called MEMS sensors, which new technology. We've got the stretchable electronics. We are looking to move up the value chain a little bit. We've even got some solutions where we've got patient monitoring solutions, energy management solutions. So we're continually looking at opportunities and maybe even healthcare products as well. So not obviously we want to look where our base business is, but we actually have I
Yeah.
think what I would call really a three-layer strategy. Our components business, then more of an integrated module, and then the third one being really full solutions.
Uh-huh.
Trevor, may
Yeah. I mean,
I chime
yeah.
in? Question.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
I'm putting my attendee hat on. So
Yeah.
I, having a degree in electrical engineering, hearing the words capacitor and resistor, I mean, that kind of resonated with me from years back. My question is, I mean, your operation is pretty much in the earlier stages of the value chain, so to speak. I mean, your products get used in the chips get used in this and that, and it moves on. I want to go to your supplier side. In terms of the types of input materials you use, be it some minerals like cobalt and lithium and all that for the electrical batteries, for instance. Uh, could you talk about the sourcing, how the sourcing of your input materials are done, and whether there are any challenges in the current context or going forward in terms of scarcity, accessibility, or maybe pricing?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so good question. There's a lot in that little kind of package there, but I think this is one of the I'd say the beauties of maybe, and Trevor knows a little bit more about this, but of a typical Japanese company. So we actually make our own ceramic powder. Okay, we have the raw materials, we make our own powder. We actually have our own equipment making company because we can't go out and buy a piece of equipment to make a 1 millimeter capacitor. We have to make that equipment. So we have our own Murata manufacturing company that makes equipment. So we've got that full vertical integration in the company. There are some things that we do obviously buy external, but that's where a lot of companies then really obviously value Murata, and that Murata has that value chain, and we have many years worth of supply of that ceramic material, and obviously long history there. So really that vertical integration is very nice and very comfortable to have.
This may be getting a little bit too far in the weeds, but is it a particular type of clay? Here in Georgia, we have kaolin clay, which is very well used in all kinds of applications. I was just wondering if some of that ceramic might even come from here.
No, it actually doesn't. We use so the founder actually wrote a book called The Wonderstones, and our material is barium titanate is the ceramic material.
Okay.
And so everything we have is kind of based off that ceramic. And I think, as you know, Kyoto is quite famous for ceramics and that type of stuff. So a little bit different material than our friends there in at
Macon.
Toronto. But no, it's very good. And so that's why we've called the venture capital company is the Wonderstones. And then we also actually have an exhibit at the Osaka Expo 2025. And one of the devices there is called a Wonderstone. And the Wonderstone looks like a piece of stone that you get in your hand, and it will change colors, it will guide you, it'll pull you, it'll do a number of different things and guide you through the expo. So trying to build on that theme of the ceramic materials, and that's the Wonderstone that really drove Murata to where we are.
Yeah, that's maybe I remember holding one of your devices in Yokohama that was kind of doing a haptic sort of thing, like putting pressure on different joints and whatnot, and it literally felt like it was pulling you in a different direction. So
That's correct. Yeah, if you go out and look at the Expo 25, you'll see that device, and it will guide you through the expo. It'll even nicely pull you over to meet somebody if you've got the same interest as that person. So
oh my gosh,
that's
amazing.
very interesting. But it pulls together all of the haptics, wireless, sensing, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
So where I kind of got exposed to Murata the first time was Murata Boy and Murata Girl, the two robots that sort of helped humanize robotics a little bit. And also, I know that artificial intelligence is obviously a big trend. So, can you talk about those two sectors, robotics and AI, and how they fit into your business going forward?
Yeah. So robotics is one of the 6 key themes that the Wonderstone Ventures is going to be focused on. We see that as really a tremendous growth area. And even if you look at some of the EV companies, they actually have then robotics groups. But I think robots, if manufacturing is truly to return to America, it's really probably going to be robots, not necessarily people. But then there's obviously conversation that each house will have some kind of robot and those types of things. So yeah, lots to really see and do in that robotic area. And again, that would then be the capacitors. It would be wireless. It would be sensors. Batteries. Just all of our products. Again, very, very well suited for that.
What about AI?
Yeah, Trevor, there's a question from the audience that kind of links just to what David mentioned.
Okay,
and it's
great.
from Stephen Adler. He's noting that as we think about supply chain resiliency into the future and the reality of reduced human talent due to slowing birth rate, how is Murata thinking about its own resiliency in terms of innovation, operations, etc., given that it's an actual long-term emerging risk to address?
Yes, yeah, good question. So in our factories, if you were to visit into one of our manufacturing factories, we have a lot of automation. You will be walking down hallways and there'll be autonomous guided vehicles will be moving product. That autonomous guiding vehicle could even get in the elevator with you. So we are implementing a lot of the technologies that we're actually supporting as well. And even wireless charging on those autonomous, AGVs, the guided vehicles, when they're at rest, they would kind of come to a parking spot. The parking spot would be next to a wireless charging station and recharge that AGV. So yeah, we use a lot of that currently in our own manufacturing, and that's why we actually can continue to have so much manufacturing in Japan because of that automation.
Do you feel like sort of related to that, being in Japan, in a place that's kind of a forerunner and dealing with the issue of, depleted workforce and aging population, is that kind of an advantage as you look out to other markets, maybe dealing with the same thing in the future?
Yeah, I think each market has its benefits, and so obviously that's one of the key things in Japan. Our European group is obviously very focused on environmental issues and those types of things, so that's where we get a real education there. But I think yes, how to best utilize resources, actual physical resources, but people as well, very key. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know you've also, maybe there's another question, Nate, so just let us know if that was a comment. But yeah, let us know if anybody else wants to interject, and please do gather your questions and type them into the Q&A function as we go here so we can pose them to David. But I was going to ask about your workforce here in the US. How do you think about developing that, growing that? I know we have a lot of educators on the panel or on the call, so what are you looking for in your students or in your those who are coming out of college, and how do you kind of cultivate your pipeline of labor here?
Yes, yeah. So typically I would say, we're looking for obviously engineering type technical people would be the majority, because we're doing the design work here. We're designing the products in with customers. So the actual workforce here is about approximately, let's just say 400 people. probably a good 150 plus of them are actually engineers working in design, business development, product marketing activities. We obviously there in Atlanta, we've got a very strong pipeline with KSU, Kennesaw State University, but we do things with Penn State, Drexel. Here in Dallas, it's UTD, a number of different things. But I think maybe shifting a little bit, Trevor, but one of the things that we do, obviously, with all of our planning, we actually use a fairly old technique called the balanced scorecard methodology. And the balanced scorecard has the 4 categories, the finance, the customer, the internal, and the learning and growth. And we use that a lot. Maybe it's old, but we like to use it. But where I'd say we really benefit is we start at the bottom of that. We start with the learning and growth part. And if we do the learning and growth part and develop people and mentor them and give them the training they need and satisfy their CSR needs and those types of things, then you move up into the internal, the customer, you'll get the financial results. And so we use that a lot. It's a great communication tool as well. But that's how we also then, every employee knows what's going on in the company, because we then share the balanced scorecard with them and obviously update it, communicate it. So little bit old, maybe old school, but actually it works and we like to use it. So that's I think how we tie in, and like I say, starting at that bottom right part rather than what's the revenue target.
Right.
We start down here and we will get those results.
Well, I can't stop to mention that that's music to our ears, David. I mean, prioritizing human resource development and training and growth and starting from there to kind of fuel the rest. There is one other question I'd like to share with you from Cecilia Gu, one of our faculty. She says, you mentioned building a manufacturing base in the Americas. She would love to hear more about how Murata is approaching global supply chain reconfiguration, especially as an innovation-intensive business. What are the key strategic factors you consider in this process, and how does China continue to factor into your global operations and innovation strategy?
Yeah, that's a big question. A lot of different things. So let me maybe the last part there. China still factors in. I mean, that is a huge marketplace. We have manufacturing there, and a lot of good products, good customers that we need to actually support there. And obviously, we're not trying to pick sides. We need to support people on a global basis, and that's what we're trying to do there. So we see that continuing. Externally, then what we're really trying to track is, what's happening with the customers. And, obviously, a few years back, it was BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Brazil, Russia really has not materialized in the electronics world, but China obviously did. India is a little bit later, and so that's why we're seeing it really start to accelerate now. But it's going to be a very, very challenging market, as any of you that have actually visited there. And so we've opened offices. We've just announced the manufacturing there. But we're very, very, I would say, slow and steady. We're not going to just suddenly jump in and make a quick reaction because the tariff did this, or we're looking at that longer term. What should we do? How should we do it? And so we started in India. We'll probably start with some maybe taping of the end product. And then as that continues, we'll maybe move further back into the manufacturing chain. And that's just, continuously how we would actually do that process.
Great.
Thank you.
Junaid, I think we had one more question. Yep.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. Nadine Morgan is asking a question. Speaking of pipeline of labor, she represents an organization called Women in Manufacturing, which is focused on attracting, advocating for, and supporting women in the manufacturing. The question is, how is Murata supporting its diverse workforce, especially women?
Yeah, good question. So we have a group in our maybe specific industry called Women in Electronics. And that's a group that we obviously support. We also support the Electronic Industry Association, which has training programs. The program there is called SPARK, S-P-A-R-K, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember what the acronym stands for. But that's where we send people. In fact, the person that we're sending this year is actually a lady out of Michigan. But we, as a company, we have targets in Japan, very specifically. But in the U.S., we actually, prefer to obviously try to, grow people through the training, the development of actually people. And, obviously ladies are a very, very key part of that. We held a huge, hugely successful International Women's Day about, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ago. And that actually went globally internally. So really, really successful event there. But, how do we bring people through the organization? In my staff, probably more than half of it, of the officers are from acquired companies. We do actually have a lady as a vice president. The parent company in Japan, I'm an officer of the parent company in Japan, which is the first non-Japanese person. And then we also actually have 2 ladies on our board. They're both Japanese ladies, but 2 ladies on the board. So these are big things. And that's what we, again, just kind of that slow, steady, don't make kind of quick reactions, just make it happen. And that's what we're actually doing. So that's maybe not a direct answer for that person, but that's how we want to include ladies, but obviously specifically in our industry, women in electronics is very, very important.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a related question about just whether you call it ESG or CSR or DEI or whatever acronym you want to use. How do y'all think about that social element of the company? I mean, in Japan, this getting women into the workforce is a huge issue, right? Because
That's right.
It's not only a societal issue, but it's like a productivity issue. But how do y'all think, you talked about having a longer term perspective that sort of helps and not kind of being blown and tossed by the acronym of the day, but how do y'all think about that overall?
Yeah, so I think, we obviously very, very focused on the environmental issues. Our products, our factories take a lot of power. So how do we actually, make net zero factories? And so we actually have already got a couple of net zero factories. We've issued, statements when we will be RE100 compliant. So that's kind of one complete segment of our business. And a lot of that kind of the impetus behind that actually comes from the European side of our business. The US is kind of interested, but not super interested. And there's obviously a little bit of a roadblock right now as to, does this actually get us any business? It's costing everybody a lot. So those types of things.
Yeah.
But we're very heavily into that. Maybe they separate it and then the CSR side of things. So here in the Americas, we actually have a program called Count MIA in. MIA is Murata Electronics Americas. And that's where we get very involved in the STEM activities, FIRST robotics, those types of things. But what we've done there is, rather than pick a charity or a thing, each office can choose whatever they want to do. Whatever they want to support, whether it's the Detroit office, the Chicago office, San Diego, wherever, you have to pick something, you have to do something. And so that's really very important. The company will support that event, financially, but we really want our people to actually do something. And so right now we're already over 50% employee participation in the CSR activities. So kind of maybe separate those between the ESG and the CSR side of things.
Yeah, I mean, does Murata have, it seems like he'll have also like a founding philosophy as well. I mean, it seems like most Japanese companies do. At least those were kind of founder led at their outset. And I know that y'all, kind of, a lot of Japanese companies adhere to the UN's SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. I remember being at the Keidanren offices there in Tokyo and everybody wearing their SDG pins. So it does seem like there's a consciousness about this. in within Japanese companies that maybe
Very
it's not mimicked everywhere.
very different consciousness than here in the US.
Mhm.
Actually, there was a hotel, and the hotel person was actually wearing an SDG badge as to which one the hotel supported. So, but our philosophy is actually fantastic. And I truly mean that. It's not just something that's on the wall. It's called Shaze, and it was written in the 1950s. There was one word has been changed since then, and we added the word trustworthy. And I actually ask all of my employees when they make a presentation, it's to a customer, a partner, whoever, the second slide must be the Shaze. And what I ask you to do is think, what part of that Shaze are you talking about today? So we contribute to the advancement of society is the start of it, but it's with scientific approach, it's being trustworthy, it's prosperity for everybody. So pick something. What is it? And you'll find that'll resonate with the person that you're actually talking with. And so that really isn't. And when you're struggling, maybe some days, and what am I trying to do? Go back and look at that Shaze and see where does it actually fit. We got about 2 weeks ago, we got a Supplier of the Year award from General Motors. We actually don't supply General Motors, but we actually got a Supplier of the Year award because when the earthquake hit back in January, it hit a factory that many of their suppliers were getting product from that factory. And so we kept them in the communication loop as to what we were doing, how we were bringing the factory back up, how we were moving the product. And so they gave us an award, but Supplier of the Year award, but we didn't supply. We just communicated openly with them and helped keep them there. So that's kind of the company philosophy.
Great. May I chime in, Trevor? There are a couple of
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome.
questions lined up. The first one goes back to the question about women in manufacturing. You already mentioned how much you do in trying to support women to be part of your manufacturing teams going forward. It's more a perspective question from Venkat Rao, who says, do you find any specific reason why in a developed country like America, less women are in the manufacturing? In India case, culture and legal overprotection of workplace are the reasons.
I don't see anything specific that I could say in the US for ladies not being in manufacturing. I think, when we actually look at our engineering pool as well, there's a lower number of ladies there. So the pool is not as big. So I don't know if it's something to do with why they are not selecting, engineering. But manufacturing, I think, just in general, if manufacturing comes back to the US, it's going to be a problem to find people, not just ladies. The general US population is not really interested in working in a factory. So that's kind of that. We want it to come back, but yeah, who's gonna staff it? So I understand there's a lady part to that, but there's also just a general part. I'm not sure that's what people are wanting to do.
And it might be a general universal issue as well, because engineering programs typically are skewed in terms of gender representation more toward the male side. I mean, across the world in different disciplines of engineering, particularly manufacturing related engineering. Now, another question Cecilia is following up. It's asking, could you please share how corporate venture capital fits into Murata's broader technology development strategy? What criteria guide your selection of startups, and what does a successful outcome look like beyond financial return from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that whole group is not interested in financial return. That's the number one thing. We're not investing to make money, right? That's very important. We're investing to understand the technology, the people, and really take that information and turn it into intelligence. What do we see as the opportunity? And I would say that the group is targeted on 6 specific areas. We're looking at very early stage companies, probably somewhere in the, say, the 100,000s to maybe a couple of $1 million investment into them, trying to be quite diverse. But then internally, how do we communicate with that company? Can we support them? Is there some technology that we can help them with? So it's really all of those things, but the one thing that I'd say it's not is we're not investing in them so that if they do an IPO, we make money or something like that. That's so far down, it's not even on the list.
Thank you. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, we have a related question I think we've kind of already answered, but I wanted to ask you personally, David, you talked a little bit about workforce, and we talked about some cultural issues related to Japan and Japanese workforce. I wonder what it's like for you being one of the few non-Japanese, as a director. I think you said at the parent company in Japan, like especially being a non-Japanese speaker. I wonder that seems pretty rare to me. And how have you kind of navigated that and done that? And I think there may be some lessons for those who want to kind of work for Japanese companies or within that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously worked for a Japanese company for over 40 years now, and lot of different things. One thing I'd say is to really slow down. Let the Japanese person say what they want to say, or even after you've said something, stop, because what people realize is they're translating, but what they maybe don't realize is that they're actually having to completely reconstruct the sentence.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you use, don't do this and don't do that and things like that, and they're not sure which structure it goes into. So really slow down, give the person that time. They're not really fluent. They're not taking it in English and thinking in English and giving that answer. So that's very important. Inside Murata, and probably typical with a lot of other companies, we have our own acronyms, our own things. And so even though Japanese people are talking, I basically know what they're talking about. I understand that. But then, on a very sort of business level, they've done a fantastic job of, I think, most of the executive meetings, which usually there's about one per week, usually at night. I've got one tonight. They would have a bank of about 3 translators ready. And I can go into Zoom, I go down to the bottom, I'll click translation, and that's been fantastic. But the real turning point, actually, believe it or not, Trevor, was when they used those translators to actually translate English into Japanese. And they were thinking they were translating for me, so I could understand. But actually, that was a big turning point because they thought they understood what I was saying, but then they understood better when this translated. And so then when we have breakout sessions and things like that, the conversation, I can start having conversations with really non-English speaking people in that organization. So it's really been very, very, very good, several years worth of activities there for sure.
But beyond language, kind of what do you see as, I mean, obviously Japan has a very distinct culture. You've had many years of experience in kind of learning how to deal with the differences. I mean, do you have any kind of highlights or pointers for people that are engaging with Japanese businesses?
Yeah, I mean, there's many. Just recognize that when you're invited for dinner, and there's going to be several people there for dinner, pay attention to who's at dinner. Try and understand which group they're from. And typically you'll find that there's somebody being invited that you maybe don't know who they are. Well, about 6 months from now, you'll find out who they are because they're coming to the US as an expat or something like that. So really, it's not just dinner. It's an important part of the whole getting to know you, building that trust, understanding. You don't talk a lot of business, but that's a very important part of that network. And the other thing I'd say is, take some time, spend a weekend. I like to, if I get a chance, I love to play golf, or even I'll get some people and say, hey, let's go for a hike somewhere. So just try and build that next level, deeper relationship. And, I in fact have people that I've known for 40 plus years, because they were trainees in Atlanta the same time I started and things like that. So that's really that whole relationship building and networking is super, super critical in the Japanese culture.
Yeah, well, my impression with my limited experience in Japan, only having been a couple times, is that it's a little bit harder to build the relationship at the front end, but then once you built it, it's much more solid on a firm and long-lasting foundation, it feels like.
Yeah, don't think you're going to go over there and make one presentation and they're going to do what you said. That is not going to happen. Not going to. And so you have to over communicate. The other thing I'd say is you have to broaden your communication network of people that you're going to talk to and also go deeper. Typically in the US, you talk to the top person, then he'll go back to his group and tell you, hey, I met this guy and we talked about this, this, and this. In Japan, that will not happen. You have to go to all the different levels. You have to go to that breadth. You have to do communication and networking.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's a consultative approach and from the bottom up sometimes, right? And then, once the decision is made, it goes fast, but it takes a long time to get to bubble up to the surface.
You hit the nail on the head. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great insights. Great. Trevor, I just want to chime in with two more questions. One of them, actually, I think, David, you already mentioned or touched upon a lot. It's about Murata's corporate purpose overall, especially in relation to your CVCs, that they're not financially driven. And the other question is from Venkat, do you think medium and small industries, manufacturing workplaces will be impacted by Gen AI? If so, what is Murata experience embracing for the change?
Yeah, some interesting questions there. I think we're using AI internally, starting off with some of just maybe some simple presentations, some of those types of things. But it's really, to me, it's you've got a lot of data, and we all had data. We had it all kind of different places. It's now who can really utilize AI to manage this data and really make some substantive activity from it, right? Not just your resume looks a little bit better or your PowerPoint looks a little bit better or some of those types of things. So it's really, how are you going to actually use that? And so we're trying to actually start getting better visibility. We're loading in all of our customers. We get a lot of customers' forecasts. And so, as you mentioned earlier, we're very, very much earlier in the manufacturing supply chain. So if we can monitor these forecasts and we can use AI, can we get some better leading economic activity that will better understand? So those are the types of things that I believe people have got to kind of get past. It's this quick, okay, great, we've got a boom of we're shipping more product because everybody's making AI servers and getting ready for it, but what is it that people are really going to do? What's that key thing? And it's not quite apparent yet. Just correcting and proofreading a couple of emails or resumes is not it. It's got to be more. And so that's what we're really trying to do is what are we doing there? But deep into our R&D factories as well, they're doing things with AI. And then very specifically, even in groups like legal and intellectual property, they're doing some things with AI as well. So it's in every different area, but it's how do we really get some value out of it?
Perfect.
Yeah, and I just did a story with some companies from India, Mahindra, the big tractor manufacturer, and there were some other ones. But one of the things they mentioned is the AI application is only as good as the problems that it's aimed at. You have to kind of define the problem first. You can't work backwards and say this is a solution and find the problem to fit it. You got to do the other way. So thank you so much, David. I really appreciate it. I'm going to relinquish the reins here and hand it back over to GSU to close us out. But I've really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation, whichever other educational institution brings us together to speak. I'm there for it. So thank you so much.
Very good. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor, for a great moderation. Thank you to all the attendees for the inquiries, questions that were raised. And dearly, thank you, David, for great insights. It's been mind-opening, very sincere, very useful, right to the point. And one thing that I would hopefully get involved in would be to add GSU to your list of universities where we can support you, your employees, or your communities with the kinds of programs or sport initiatives that we may do along with our graduates. Yeah. So thank you for taking the time again. It's, as I said, it's been very informational, and we're receiving a lot of thank yous, excellent session comments on the chat, and hope to be remain connected moving forward. And thank you, everybody. See you next time in our upcoming webinar.
Very good. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, David.